It's another beautiful day in Costa Rica. Nikki and I are having a blast just walking some of the beautiful places, looking at the ocean views. But no matter where you're at, you're gonna find that, hey, there are some drawbacks, and Costa Rica is no difference. There are a lot of drawbacks to living in Costa Rica. Matter of fact, I bet you'll be surprised to learn that more expats leave Costa Rica than those that stay. The statistics show that between 80 to 90% of all expats that move into Costa Rica will leave within the first 2 years. Now that's shocking all by itself, but I have some great news for you. What can you do so that the things that affected them and caused them to leave doesn't affect you? We're going to talk about that on today's episode.
When you decide to move and live in Costa Rica, there are two very challenging obstacles. The first is finding the right place to live and then how to buy that property. The second is deciding to either buy an existing house or build a house. Which one is better? So I've got some great news for you. We can help you to easily overcome those two obstacles and much more when you schedule your free 20-minute phone consultation and talk to one of our professionals who will answer your questions so you can enjoy another happy day in Costa Rica.
All right, so before we get started, keep in mind that, hey, I'm sharing from my experience of being in Costa Rica for 9 years or since 2013. And, you know, a lot of things is really about your perspective. You know, if you're coming from a place, you know, like California, Los Angeles, or some countries where it's just terribly expensive, or life is generally just worse there than what you might experience in Costa Rica, then you might not agree with this. Hey, another thing is that, hey, living in Costa Rica and visiting Costa Rica is two totally different experiences and not at all the same. So if you've never lived in Costa Rica, then you don't have the right to comment below this video and say, not true. Once you live here, it is totally different. Now, if you decide to live over in the city, okay, or in San Jose, the metropolitan area, and if you have plenty of money, well, a lot of the things that we'll talk about today won't affect you, because I often say that money solves a multitude of issues. But no matter how much money you have, there's a lot of things and a lot of drawbacks to living in Costa Rica that's going to cause you to leave within the first couple of years or a few years thereafter. But there are some things that you can do so that you can enjoy your slice of paradise, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to hit a few of these things briefly, and then today, right after this video, we're going to do a live broadcast where you'll have the ability to come on live and hopefully share some of your experiences and your perspective. So let's get into it. Why do majority of expats that come to Costa Rica leave? Well, I think, number one, the most important thing, they have unrealistic expectations. You know, whenever I came here 9 years ago, I didn't do any research. At the time I was married, my wife said, hey, let's go to Costa Rica, and it was a great idea. Within 30 days of her saying, let's go to Costa Rica, we didn't do any research, but we had 10 suitcases, a dog, and we was on the way to Costa Rica within 30 days of her saying that. So, a lot of people that haven't done the research, they hear and they think, wow, Costa Rica is so sexy, beautiful beaches, you know, it's green, it's wonderful. And so if we take a look at some of these things, because that's what they hear, well, it's what's important is for you to understand marketing, okay? So put yourself in the shoes of somebody like the government or someone that has a brand new product, okay? The marketing says, Costa Rica's so eco-friendly, we're green, green, green. You know, we have the best schools, we have the best medical. Stop, okay? Is that really true? Well, you don't know until you're here and you experience it. But here's the facts. The facts are that whenever you're doing marketing on YouTube, on billboards, on the internet, nobody says, we have the second best schools in the country. We have the second best medical. Nobody says that. everybody says they have the best. And while Costa Rica does absolutely have some pretty good medical, and yes, if you are a resident and you're paying into the CAHA system, then you can get that public medical. But you know what? That's great if you're retired and you have a lot of time. But I've been to that public medical. Now, I wasn't paying into the system. I went to the public medical because I had some bug bites, okay, that was really having some serious problems, but I had to be there all day long. And yes, it was fairly cheap to pay for all of that. The private medical is top notch. It is absolutely amazing, okay? So there's a huge difference between the private medical and the public medical, okay? So when they say they have the best medical, well, they're not lying, but they're not saying all of the truth. And if you're not telling all of the truth, well, isn't that still a lie? So anyway, you know, it's important to know that. Hey, they say they have the best schools. Well, that's, once again, it's all in perspective because, you know, almost every single little town has that itty bitty school. There's one teacher teaching a handful of children, and that one teacher is teaching everybody from kindergarten up to about 6th or 7th grade. And you know what? That's where most of them stop, because then they have to move away or go to the largest city nearby to go to a high school. So do they have the best schools? Not in my opinion, okay? So is it a great place to bring your children? Well, it is safe, but it's not great as far as education goes. They would get a far better education in the United States. But hey, if you're bringing your children, hey, just have them go to online schooling. That would be awesome then. So there are some solutions to some of those drawbacks, okay? So the first drawback is just a lot of unrealistic expectations because they simply did not do the research, or they watched a lot of YouTube channels. And the YouTube channels that they watch, come on, let's speak some truth here. The majority of the YouTube channels are there because they're trying to sell you a product, sell you a service. And so think like that person on YouTube. What can I teach you about Costa Rica? I'm going to tell you all the wonderful things. I'm going to tell you the great things about Costa Rica. Because if I tell you the negative things about Costa Rica, well, then you're not going to come here and you're not going to buy my tour package. You're not going to buy my vacation package. You're not going to hire me to help you move to Costa Rica. Now, I'm not saying all YouTube channels are like that. You know, there are some YouTube channels here that they sell a service or a product, and some of them are telling you stuff. But you know, on this channel, we don't sell you anything, and that's simply because we're trying to give you the information. We give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that you can make a informed, educated decision on whether you really do want to live in Costa Rica or not. So those are just things that you need to really think about. So unrealistic expectations, I think, is the number one reason why so many people leave, okay? So you want to make sure you do your research and you make sure that you talk to other people and you find out and have a realistic expectation. If you have a realistic expectation, it's going to improve your success rate. Let's take a look at a couple of other things. You know, a lot of people have heard by doing some research that, man, it's cheap to live in Costa Rica. And you know, years ago, it was cheap. However, it's like that narrative continued to go and continue to go and continue to go. And if you say it enough times, everybody believes it. But it's not cheap to live in Costa Rica. Matter of fact, there's only two things that's cheap about Costa Rica. That is your rent, and if you're a gringo, you're still going to pay more than the locals do, okay? But your rent can be very cheap, and if you're smart, you can rent some very cheap places. And on average, most of the places I rented were 2 or 3 bedroom houses. They were Tico houses. But you know what? I've rented as low as $100 a month to as much as $300 a month, okay? And so I'm not in touristy areas, and so your rent is cheap. And so that's why a lot of retired people, while they may be retired in the United States and they might have a retirement check of, you know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, they still have to struggle in the United States to enjoy that retirement. So they can move to a place like Costa Rica, they can live in a Tico house, and they can enjoy their retirement. So when you look at it from that perspective, okay, it can be cheap to live in Costa Rica. You can live on a budget. It's probably not going to be very fun, but you can do it. So like I said, there's two things that's cheap. One is rent, and the other is labor. So if you got plenty of money, hey, it's great because then you can employ or you can help people, with jobs. But that's a whole nother video, because if you're not careful, that will bite you in the butt. So, that's something that we should really talk about, and we'll talk about on today's live broadcast, okay? But way too much to get into right here. I just want to breeze over a couple of topics, why people do leave and what can you do about it. So, hey, adjust your expectations and it'll make things a whole lot easier for you. Another thing is that people don't realize that Costa Rica is indeed a third world country. I don't say that in a mean way at all, okay? However, in the United States, we are simply used to, everything being so improved, the technology is there, the internet is there, the banking is easy. We're used to everything happening and everything just being so easy and at our fingertips. Well, a lot of people simply cannot adjust to being in a third world country and having to adopt that pura vida mentality, that pura vida lifestyle. It is a huge challenge, especially depending on what personality type you are. I've done a lot of research on personality types, and in general, they always say there's 4 different personality types. And of those 4 different personality types, only one of them really fit in to Costa Rica. I'm that type A, or that, that loud, that go and get it, well, type A people almost never make it here. In order to make it here, well, you got to adopt, what I've learned in the Marine Corps. You have to adapt and overcome. You have to do a lot of adjusting. So in order for a type A personality person to be here, boy, you got to have a lot of willpower. You've got to adapt and overcome. The only personality that really can enjoy Costa Rica, well, I call it, they already have the pura vida personality. They're the laid back type of person. They're almost always late, which means they're gonna fit right in. They're the kind of person that gets up in the morning and they're all excited. Man, today we're gonna go to church, and then after church we're gonna go shopping, and then we're gonna pick up a few things, we're gonna go to the beach, and then after church they're like, I don't really want to go today. Let's do it another day. Oh, you got that manana trait, don't you? Yeah, manana. Well, manana never comes. So, that personality is the kind of personality that just fits right into Costa Rica. So there's only one personality that when you come here, you're going to love it, okay? But, like I said, Costa Rica is a third world country. In the United States, if you need to go get some money, you go to the ATM machine, you can withdraw dollars just like that. Well, in Costa Rica, it's a huge challenge to go withdraw dollars. Not every ATM machine has dollars, okay? And, while you can withdraw colones, a lot of times you need to withdraw dollars so that you can put it in your other bank account, or for whatever reason, because some places only accept dollars, okay? That's a whole nother conversation in itself. But in the United States, if you need to deposit money, hey, walk up to the ATM machine, deposit money, 5 minutes, you're in and you're out. Not in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, you go to the bank, you might be sitting at the bank 2 or 3 hours in order to deposit money. I got a video coming up in just a few days that talks about the difference of banking in Costa Rica. So if you're coming to Costa Rica, you need to just understand that everything, and when I say everything, everything takes longer than normal. So, the pura vida lifestyle is very hard for a lot of people to adjust. So what's the solution to that? Chill. You just have to know everything takes longer. You need to leave early. And if you don't want to wait in long lines, like I hate waiting in lines, then go to the bank early. Bank opens at 8:30. I was there at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, there was already 2 people ahead of me. By the time the bank opened at 8:30, well, now I had 4 people ahead of me. Well, wait a minute. How do you go from having 2 people ahead of you to 4? Well, in Costa Rica, one of the things I really love is that they do respect their older people pregnant people and people that, you know, are crippled, lame, or whatever. So by the time the bank opened up, he had all of the old people come to the front. And so now I have to, even though I was there 30 minutes early, well, now I got to wait another 30 minutes for those 4 people. Well, how does it take 30 minutes for 4 people? Because the majority of people, the transaction is going to take about 15 minutes per person. It takes a long time. So anyway, you just have to understand, chill, okay? Crime, that's a huge one, okay? And hey, understand that, you know, for the most part of Costa Rica is indeed safe, but there is a lot of petty crime, okay? And so because there's a lot of petty crime, you know, I just get tired of having to lock up every single thing. But if you leave it out, it's going to get picked up. You got to lock up that propane tank, because if you don't lock up that propane tank, it's going to get stolen. If you leave your shoes out. So that's why you see a lot of houses and it looks like they live in their own prison. They got these cement walls and there's barbed wire and there's electrical wire and there's concertina wire. It looks like they're in their own prison. That's not the way I want to live, okay? However, what's the solution to that? Well, I always say that if you can control your environment, in other words, you come here and you find your slice of paradise, you bought several hectares, and then you don't have any neighbors, right? Then you can build your house in the middle of that, and you don't have the problems that come with living in Costa Rica with, you know, lots of noise, or your neighbor who's only 10 feet away from you and he's got 20 chickens, and of those 20 chickens, 10 of them are roosters, and they all start crowing at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they don't stop crowing until 9 o'clock at night. So, pura vida. A couple of other things real quick. You cannot get good technology here. You know, the technology, as I said before, is way behind now. Since I came here in 2013, Costa Rica has made a lot of advancements, okay? However, you know, internet is way better today than it was back then, but there's still a lot of places. And of course, I'm over in another area on this build site, and guess what? There's this really nice subdivision. But in that subdivision, even though there's nothing but rich people in that subdivision, they don't have good internet. And guess what? The internet companies don't want to come in there because they don't want to spend the money to run the lines down there, because to them it's not enough people, even though probably every one of them would buy that internet. So it's amazing to me that even in this touristy area, there are tons of places that simply do not have good internet. So if you're coming over here and you need to work because of the internet, oh look, you're probably going to end up living in town, and so it just limits you as to where you can live. But there is a solution to it. You know, if you are that type of personality, man, you like to get the latest Apple Watch, you like to get the latest computer, you get the latest iPad, well, you're not going to buy it in Costa Rica. You can, but you're probably going to end up having problems. It's not going to be as good. Now, what I can say is that Apple products are generally just as good here as they are in the United States, but it's going to cost you a whole lot more. I always suggest, hey, if you're a tech geek, you like technology, buy that stuff when you go home and visit, and then bring it back with you. You're going to save a whole lot of money, and you're going to get great stuff. It's hard to find name brand stuff in Costa Rica. That's just Costa Rica. And the last thing I want to talk about is that the little things matter. And so it's like all of those little things can just pile up. So between the little things, the big things, the little things do matter. You know, in the United States, Canada, we're used to having stable electricity, stable water, stable internet. We're used to everything actually working. Well, it's not uncommon. The electricity goes off all the time. You're in the middle of the work. And then if it goes off, it's bad enough that it just blinks. But then sometimes it goes off and won't come on for hours. Or the water goes off. And you know what? The water goes off a whole lot and it never fails. It goes off right when I'm coming home from my run, and then I'm sitting there all sweaty. So, you know, there are solutions. You can put up a water tank. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do to alleviate that. If the electricity goes off, buy you some solar panels. You know, there are things, but everything costs money. That's why I say money solves a multitude of issues. So, you know, the little things matter, and those little things can just add up. You know, this week was a tough week. So while I got a lot of stuff accomplished, well, because of the crime, because of petty theft, credit card theft is a huge thing in Costa Rica. I was on my last credit card until yesterday, but now my last credit card got compromised. Why? Well, because there's so many people that when you're in Costa Rica and you give them that credit card, you can't watch them all the time. They're around the corner and they're writing down your number, your expiration date, names, and then they're going to use that credit card later. So you need to make a habit of always checking your credit card statement. But they know gringos got too much money. They're not looking at their credit card statement. So guess what? They're going to be charging stuff on your credit card, a little here, a little there, and you're not going to catch it. So while you do have, unethical employees that'll do that, well, huge companies will do that. One place, I was sitting on top of the mountain there with my phone, ding, and so I have an Apple Card. Well, I love the titanium Apple Card because it doesn't have any numbers on there. And I used to use it a lot because, Ticos couldn't write down my number. It made it much more difficult for them to steal my credit card information. Well, I'm sitting on top of the mountain, I get a notification on my phone, and I look, and guess what? Even though I was 2 hours from town, my phone showed that I'd got $30.65 worth of gas at a gas station that was 3 hours away. And an hour away from that gas station was another gas station owned by the same guy. I'd gotten the same $30.65 worth of gas there at the exact same time as there. Well, guess what? That wasn't some employee. That was the owner or someone in high level position of that ownership of those gas stations, a chain of gas stations, and they were charging my card simply because they know most gringos do not look at their statement, so it's easy to steal money from gringos. So, it's just part of being here, and you have to realize that there are a lot of drawbacks to living in Costa Rica. There are a lot of disadvantages living in Costa Rica. It is expensive. Now, look, I did a video a couple of years ago on the cost of living in Costa Rica. Can you live in Costa Rica on a $1,000 budget? And you can. And guess what? Even though that video is a couple of years old, it's actually cheaper to live in Costa Rica today than it was 2 years ago, and that's because of the Clona rate. And we'll talk more about that in today's live broadcast. So anyway, that's just some highlights, some of the main reasons why people leave Costa Rica in just 2 years after they've moved here. So there are a lot of things that you can do, and one of the most important things you can do so that you don't get affected by those things is to come to Costa Rica. Live at least 1 full year so you can experience the seasons of Costa Rica, so that you can experience and be around a lot of the people. If you're here for at least a year, then you can really get a feel for it. The number one thing to remember is that, it does get a whole lot easier to live in Costa Rica after you've gotten your residency. However, that residency process can easily take a year and a half, 2 years, and longer. Well, you've already gotten fed up with everything but before you even got your residency. Once you get your residency, it does make it a lot easier. But why is it so difficult until you get your residency? Well, Costa Rica makes everything hard for the gringos and for the tourists because they're like, if you're gonna be here, get your residency. But then Costa Rica makes it very difficult for you to get your residency, and it's a long, long process. So all of those things and everything mounting up at one time can cause the breaker to flip, and you're like, I've got enough. I'm going home. There are things that you can do to make life better, and so I hope you'll join me on today's live broadcast where we'll go into detail on some of these things, and I hope hear from some other people sharing their perspective about some of the drawbacks of Costa Rica.